He walked in with a pen, not a sword, but his presence carried the edge of one. Dominic Kraus was not a stranger to confrontation. He had grilled presidents, dismantled bishops, and once, with a single televised interview, caused a royal resignation. To him, truth was a performance, and he was always center stage. Now, he sat across from Pope Leo XIV, not in secret, not in shadows, but under searing lights before a global audience that stretched from Rome to Rio, from Manila to Milwaukee. And though the cameras were silent, the tension wasn't. It buzzed. It pressed against the walls like a coming storm. The moderator's cue faded. The floor was his. Dominic didn't hesitate. His tone was cordial, his face polite, but his words, they were designed to open a wound. "Your Holiness," he began, voice smooth and sharpened. "Many believe the Catholic Church is now more divided than it has ever been. Some say doctrine is being weaponized, bishops turning on bishops, and faithful Catholics no longer recognize the voice of Peter." Then the pause, just enough to deepen the cut. He leaned in slightly, eyes fixed on Leo. "Do you believe, as others do, that you are the cause of this division?" The room did not breathe. Even the technicians, trained to ignore spectacle, froze in place. A boom mic trembled. Somewhere in the crowd, a rosary slipped through someone's fingers. And still, the Pope said nothing. He did not blink. He did not shift. He did not defend. He simply looked, not at Kraus, but through him, through the lens, through the screens, through every living room, chapel, and hidden place where the church still suffered. And in that silence, something broke. Not in Leo, but in the air around him. Time slowed. The moment thickened. He had heard the question 1,000 times in 1,000 ways. But this time, he would answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was not loud, but it landed like thunder. Measured, grave, clean as judgment. And what he said next would not only silence that room, it would leave the whole world asking, what church have we become? Now ask yourself, not as a spectator, but as a soul. Why wouldn't you subscribe to Holy Shadows now, if your heart felt that weight? Or are you among those who prefer the silence before the answer? Because it doesn't demand anything from you? He had once baptized a dying soldier in the mud of Aleppo, using the blood on the boy's forehead because there was no water. Before that, he stood between machetes and a nun in Uganda, whispering a psalm louder than the men could shout. Later, he buried 13 children in a week after a cholera outbreak swept through a camp that no camera ever filmed. This was Pope Leo XIV, a man who had not read the gospel from a podium, but had dragged it through war zones, famines, and forgotten places where hope no longer spoke. To some, he was a prophet. To others, a problem. He was elected not by ambition, but by desperation. The conclave had deadlocked. The church was cracking under scandal, cowardice, and contradiction. And then Leo, then still Father Angelo Ricci, had walked in with a single sentence scrawled in his prayer book. Woe to the shepherds who feed themselves. 3 days later, he was pope. No campaign, no alliances, just hunger, hunger for holiness. But now, seated beneath Vatican lighting and global scrutiny, he was being questioned not about mercy, but about division. Across from him sat Dominic Kraus and Dominic. He believed in the power of the stage. He was lean, polished, fluent in 5 languages, and allergic to reverence. His columns dismantled reputations with surgical phrasing. He didn't raise his voice. He simply rearranged yours. For years, he had requested interviews with previous popes. He'd always been declined. But Leo had said yes. Not because he sought publicity, but because he knew the wolves were no longer outside the fold. They wore collars now. They preached tolerance without truth and mercy without repentance. And someone had to speak. So here they sat, the man who had walked through hell to guard the faith, and the man who had never stepped inside a confessional without holding a camera. The studio's walls were padded, but nothing could cushion the weight of the moment. 2 men, 2 worlds, 1 church, tearing at its seams. Behind the cameras, bishops exchanged glances. Aides watched the live counter tick past 120 million. Every sentence now risked becoming a spark. And Pope Leo, had no intention of dousing the fire. Dominic leaned back slightly, satisfied. He had asked the question. It had landed. And now the world waited to see if this so-called Pope of the people would crumble under the suggestion that he was the source of the Church's division. But Leo did not fumble. He did not sigh, nor shuffle his notes. He simply looked at Dominic as if staring at a lost son. Not with scorn, but with ache. Because Leo saw it. The brilliance, the pain, the ache for meaning hidden behind the practiced smirk. And he also saw something else. That Dominic, despite all his confidence, had never heard the truth spoken without flinching. And so Leo spoke, not in defense, not an apology, but like a man unshackled from the fear of losing anything except God's silence. You feel it, don't you? That tension stretching across the screen, the clash between what flatters and what pierces. If you know this matters, if you know this is the kind of story too rare to ignore, then don't just listen. Subscribe to Holy Shadows. And if not, we dare you. Tell us why in the comments. What's stopping you from standing with the truth? The smile returned. It was careful, polite, perfectly engineered for the cameras. Dominic Kraus did not mind being corrected, so long as he could pivot. He had done it 1,000 times. He folded his hands, leaned in slightly, and began with silk. Your Holiness, he said, many admire your clarity. But others say your words have alienated progressive Catholics. Those who feel the Church must evolve or be left behind. Who feel that insisting on doctrine in the modern world creates walls where we need bridges. It was polite, measured, but everyone in the room could hear the blade beneath the question. Leo didn't blink. He let the words settle like dust on stone. Then, slowly, he raised his eyes, not just to Kraus, but beyond him. The Church, Leo said, does not belong to progressives, nor to conservatives. It does not belong to factions or ideologies. It belongs to Christ. And Christ does not evolve. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Silence again, the kind that presses in like a cloud. Kraus did not falter, but a small tick of discomfort appeared in his jaw, visible only to those trained to see it. He responded quickly. Surely, though, unity must be the goal. He smiled again, warm now, an appeal to reason. Surely the Church must find a middle ground to remain whole. Leo's gaze was soft, but his words did not soften. Unity, he said, is not the same as agreement. We are not united because we all nod at the same time. We are united because we follow the same shepherd, and that shepherd speaks truth. A longer pause. Unity without truth, Leo continued, is not peace. It is surrender. The words rang out like a bell in winter air, clear, cold, and unignorable. In the control room, no one dared cue the next segment. The technicians knew they were no longer filming an interview. They were capturing a confrontation between vision and vanity. Kraus straightened, adjusted his notes, and gave a faint laugh. Just enough to pretend he was still in control. But something had shifted. He had expected doctrine. He had not expected conviction without cruelty, clarity without rage. He had not expected a man whose calm made every defense feel like panic. And the audience, millions watching, they knew it too. Not because Leo raised his voice. He hadn't. He hadn't even moved. But truth doesn't need a shout. It simply stands, and everything else must lean or fall. See what's happening? Watch closely, because this is how lies lose their footing. Not with fury, but with quiet certainty. If that moved you, subscribe to Holy Shadows now. And if it unsettled you, say so. Don't hide in silence. The comments are open, and the silence you keep may be louder than the words you refuse to say. The smile was gone. It didn't fade. It dropped like a curtain after the final act. Dominic Kraus no longer played a charm. He leaned forward, voice lower now, more intimate, more surgical. Some, he said, are beginning to wonder if your leadership is driving the Church backward. Not toward unity, but toward division. Your emphasis on absolutes, sin, judgment, repentance. It's alienating voices that call for change, for inclusion, for compassion. There it was. Not a question, but an accusation sewn in velvet. Dominic no longer sought answers. He sought submission, but Pope Leo XIV did not shift. His hands remained still, folded before him like a man at prayer. His eyes, however, deepened. Something ancient moved there, grief without sentiment, steel without rage. He didn't respond immediately, because truth, unlike reaction, waits. And then he spoke, not to Dominic, but to everyone. "I have held the hands of dying children," Leo began, "not in hospitals, but in deserts where no medicine came. I have sat beside mothers who buried their babies in plastic bags because there were no coffins. I have anointed the foreheads of priests whose mouths were stuffed with cloth before they were shot. I know what division looks like. I have felt it in my hands, and I have smelled it in the air when gunpowder mingles with incense." A hush fell. Even Dominic blinked. Leo's voice remained gentle, but it no longer asked to be understood. It simply was. A river cutting through stone. "Division does not begin when truth is spoken," he continued. "It begins when it is betrayed, watered down until mercy becomes permission, and love becomes license." Dominic's jaw tightened. He shifted, forced a half-smirk, and spoke with teeth barely parted. "So," he said, "you were judging the more liberal cardinals then?" It was meant to corner, to trap him in an admission the media could feast on. But Leo didn't flinch. He looked at Dominic the way a shepherd looks at a restless sheep. Not with contempt, but with quiet ache. "I'm judging no one," he said, "but the gospel judges us all." Silence again, this time not stunned, but sacred. And then Leo added, as if offering a final nail to seal the moment. "Politics divides. The gospel unites. But only if we let it cut us first." Dominic didn't speak. He couldn't, because the room had turned, not against him, but toward something bigger than him. And in that space, the audience, the real audience. Not just those in chairs, but the millions behind screens. They could feel it. The difference between cleverness and conviction, between applause and obedience. If you've ever felt afraid to speak truth because someone told you it would cause division, this channel was built for you. Subscribe to Holy Shadows. And if you can't, if something in you recoils at what you just heard, go to the comments. Tell us why you'd rather sit in silence than stand in the fire. Because silence, too, is a choice. There are questions that seek answers, and there are questions that seek blood. Dominic Krause, now visibly unsettled, had begun to see something he didn't expect. Not just resolve, but peace. Not the peace of diplomacy, but of detachment. The kind that comes when a man no longer fears losing anything the world can take. And so Krause reached for the only weapon he had left. Not logic, not doctrine, but insult veiled in inquiry. He leaned forward, voice sharpened. "Let me ask plainly, Your Holiness, are you just a puppet for old Catholic power? The dying breath of a church afraid of the future, clinging to robes and rituals while the world moves on." The words struck like arrows, not for their sharpness, but for their desperation. Even a camera crew paused. One assistant dropped her pen. In the back row, a cardinal shifted in his seat, unsure if he was witnessing a collapse or a crucifixion. But Pope Leo did not react. He did not defend himself. He did not raise a hand or a brow. Instead, he leaned forward, and with that simple movement, time folded. Gone was the public figure. Gone was the political tension. Only one man remained, and he was not there to win. He was there to reveal. "I've buried children burned in war," Leo said, his voice steady. Not cold, not angry, but weathered. "I've walked into brothels in the middle of the night, paid in silence, and carried out girls no older than your niece. I've held priests dying of disease in lands no mapmaker cares to draw. Do you think I care what the power brokers of Rome think of me?" He didn't shout. He didn't tremble. He whispered truth, and it hit like thunder. "I don't answer to power," he continued. "I answer to God. And when I stand before him, I will not be asked how clever my compromises were. I will be asked if I told the truth when it cost everything." Krause tried to reply, but something caught in his throat, an emotion he had long buried. Shame. Leo saw it. He didn't exploit it. He honored it. "You call it naive," he said softly, "to protect the innocent. to draw lines in the sand, to speak of sin and salvation as if they're not negotiable. You call it naive, I call it sacred. That word landed with weight no headline could carry. Sacred. The studio fell dead silent. Not even the ambient hum of monitors dared to speak. Even the air refused to move. Krause sat back, eyes darting briefly, not in defiance now, but in search of something he didn't know he'd lost. Because in that moment, the power dynamic reversed. The interviewer was no longer in control, and the Pope was no longer defending. He was declaring, not an opinion, but a truth too old to age, too dangerous to be fashionable. And the world, watching in real time, felt it, not intellectually, but viscerally, the ache of a forgotten conscience rising from sleep. If your heart was stirred just now, if something sacred pressed into your soul, don't walk away. Subscribe to Holy Shadows. We don't chase trends. We tell the truth. And if you still resist it, don't hide in silence. Wrestle with your conscience in the comments below. But remember, some silences are not neutral. They are surrender. The silence didn't linger. It deepened. It wasn't the silence of hesitation. It was the silence of conscience. The kind that doesn't ask for applause, only for listening. And then Pope Leo spoke again. Calmer now, but not less forceful, like a fire that had learned how to burn without smoke. You confuse engagement with endorsement, he said. When I sit with sinners, I am not validating their sin. When I touch the leper, I am not asking for his disease. I'm rescuing souls. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. Mercy without truth is not mercy. It's flattery. And truth without mercy is not truth. It's cruelty. He let that hang, then turned to the watching world, to those who clutch their pearls when the church enters messy places. I say this. We were never meant to be clean hands folded in ivory towers. We were meant to go down into the dirt, into the blood, into the confusion, and carry light there. The camera cut briefly to the panel of hosts. One made the sign of the cross. Another quietly wiped a tear. Neither had spoken in minutes. The studio was no longer a place of commentary. It had become a kind of altar. And Dominic Krause? He tried, once more. But isn't this just moral showmanship? His voice cracked slightly, the composure fading at the edges. Leo didn't laugh. He didn't sneer. He asked a question, but not to accuse, to expose. Why does defending children make you uncomfortable? It landed like a stone in the still pond. There was no answer. Not because Krause had none, but because he had never been asked to answer that kind of question. One that didn't attack his logic, but tested his heart. Leo leaned forward again, closer this time, not to confront, but to connect. You want me to fit into your categories? Left, right, tradition, progress. But I don't serve categories. I serve a crucified king. And the thing about crosses, he gestured to the crucifix behind him. They don't win elections. They don't get likes. They don't sell books. But they save souls. A long pause. We are not here to win political battles. We are here to carry crosses. It was not a condemnation. It was a mission. It was not a rebuke. It was a reminder. Because somewhere along the line, even the faithful had begun to forget what the church was for. Not to win, not to charm, not to survive, but to save, at any cost. And the moment Leo said it, you could feel something in the room shift. Even those who disagreed couldn't dismiss it, because it wasn't rhetoric. It was testimony. If you felt the weight of truth here, if something inside you stirred when Pope Leo said we're not here to win, but to carry, don't just scroll on. Subscribe to Holy Shadows. We carry this weight with you. And if something resists still, we dare you. Confess in the comments. What's stopping you from stepping into the light? The air felt thinner now, not because of tension, but because something holy had passed through. The kind of silence that doesn't leave people uneasy, but leaves them changed. Pope Leo didn't turn to Krause. He turned to the camera, and in doing so, he turned to the world, no longer responding to accusations, no longer defending a position. Now he was pastoring. This was never about a journalist, he said. His eyes, tired but clear, seemed to reach across every screen, across time zones, across hearts. It's about what we're becoming. The studio had become a sanctuary. The stage, a kind of confessional. And the Pope wasn't looking to win. He was offering a mirror. "We are a church that heals," he said slowly, "but not by hiding wounds." You could hear pins stop moving. Even the background technicians stood still. "We do not build peace on lies or love on silence." It wasn't dramatic anymore. It was deeper than drama. This was something ancient and immediate. Leo continued, "There are many today who say the church must be relevant, trendy, soft, agreeable. But Christ didn't come to be liked. He came to redeem. And redemption hurts. It strips us, it humbles us, and then it heals us." He looked down for a moment, perhaps remembering something, or someone, then raised his eyes again. "I know what it is to be silenced, and I know what it is to stay silent. Well, I should have spoken. Never again." His hand hovered near his chest. Then he made the sign of the cross. It wasn't ritual. It was reminder. "We don't need more voices shouting," he said, voice lowering now, as if he were whispering to the soul. "We need more hearts listening." And with that, he sat back. The lights didn't flare. No applause cue sounded. Only breath. The kind of breath taken after a storm has passed. Not because the storm lost, but because someone stood still in the middle of it and remained. Direct a call to action. If this moment gave you peace or conviction, don't just leave. Subscribe to Holy Shadows, not because we have all the answers, but because we refuse to stop asking the questions that matter. And if you didn't feel it, be brave. Go to the comments and say why you're holding back. We'll listen, not to argue, to understand, because this was never about clicks. It's about conscience. If you were sitting in that chair, across from Pope Leo, beneath those harsh lights, with the weight of the world watching, what would you have asked? Would you challenge him, armed with skepticism and sharp words? Or would you listen, with the quiet humility that truth demands? Would you press for answers, or sit in stillness, letting his words settle like seeds in your soul? The room held no easy answers, no applause to guide you, only the question. What would you say? If you dare, leave your thoughts in the comments below, but do it humbly. Remember, this is not a contest of wills, but a dialogue of hearts. Because beneath the questions, beneath the silence, there's a call, a summons to seek, to wrestle, to awaken. This is Holy Shadows. May we all seek truth with humble hearts. Subscribe now, not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. And if you are still resisting, if doubt, fear, or pride keep you from joining, know this. Silence has consequences. The shadows grow darker without light. Choose to step into the light. We are waiting.